Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 581 for the 1st of December 2019. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. Coming up on this week's show, skeptical activism, getting out there in public, doing something, not sitting in your armchair, being active. I think you understand what I'm trying to say. A week ago, the Talking to the Dead performer John Edward was in Sydney, and members of the Australian Skeptics were on hand in the street to hand out information leaflets. What happened? Was it a success? What did we achieve? Did we have fun? Find out at the top of the show. Following that, it's Tim Mendham, the Executive Officer of Australian Skeptics and editor of the Skeptic magazine, back again with a look at the history of skeptics in the pub, in a segment called Pint-Sized Fun. Then to round off the show, in honour of the convention, Skepticon, coming up this time next week, we'll be at Skepticon, we're going to look at the media attention gained by the Bent Spoon Award over the years. Well, the Bent Spoon Award, of course, is awarded to the most preposterous piece of paranormal or pseudoscientific piffle. And if I remember now, the very first Australian Skeptics convention I attended was 20 years ago. 1999, it was in Adelaide. And that year, the winner of the Bent Spoon Award was, I think, Mike Willesee, the journalist Mike Willesee. And the following year was a woman called Jasmaheen, a breatharian. She claimed that she could live quite happily on air, and she didn't need to eat or drink or anything like that. Anyway, a rich history on the Bent Spoon. Find out some of the reports going back over the years later on in the show. Keep listening at the end of the show. There's some more important announcements from me, but now it's time for me to run downstairs and feed these two Skeptic Zone cats. Henrietta, the skeptical cat, one of the skeptical cats, somehow managed to get herself locked in the studio last night. I did a check, but she was hiding somewhere. So when I woke up this morning, there were various meows coming from the door. I opened it up and this little black and white streak of lightning zapped out of the room and ran downstairs for her breakfast. Sorry, Henny. Okay, you two, come downstairs for breakfast. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. John Edward Mcgee, known professionally as John Edward, claims, as do thousands of people around the world, that he can talk with the dead. Not to the dead, but with the dead. In other words, getting answers to questions or hearing messages from the dead. Edward has been visiting Australia for many, many, many years, usually coming in the middle of the year to do some spruiking for the tour he conducts towards the end of the year. It is a foregone conclusion that various media outlets, magazines, so on, will automatically invite him on to be a guest. And to the mind of the producer running a TV show or a magazine or a radio program, a skeptical voice would only matter if they think that skeptical voice would add to the publicity. In other words, let's have a skeptic in to create some false balance. Other than that, they know their audience, and largely the audience wants to hear about people who talk to the dead. Inspired by actions taken in the UK, Australian skeptics earlier this year fronted up to the performance of Sally Morgan, a UK psychic who also does the rounds of Australia regularly, and handed out flyers to people, audience, making their way in to see the show at the State Theatre here in Sydney, a grand old theatre. I regret I was not available on that occasion. However, in the past week, the occasion of John Edward appearing at the same theatre arose, and the Australian Skeptics decided to front up once again. It was thought best that me, being a middle-aged man, and could be conceived as being a bit intimidating, although those who know me would never think that. However, to a stranger, some tall bloke coming over with grey hair saying, don't do this or do that or whatever. Anyway, it was decided that Trish and Lara would be the best to simply hand out flyers at the entrance to the State Theatre. I took position across the street to photograph and be on hand in case some people got particularly annoyed with Trish and Lara. And there is a precedent for this because some years back, at a Sally Morgan performance, when Skeptics were there to hand out flyers, Sally Morgan's husband came out and was abusive and rude and threatening. And this is all being captured on video, nevertheless. We pick up the story as I make my way to meet Lara and Trish at the Sydney Town Hall. Today is Sunday, the 24th of November 2019. I'm downtown Sydney, just outside of the Sydney Town Hall, sitting at one of the new tram stops, and the tram will start operating officially in about 2 weeks, I think. Here comes one now under test. There it goes, gliding past. I'm here to take part in a little exercise. We're going to be handing out skeptical flyers to people outside the State Theatre, because at the State Theatre none other than John Edward is appearing this afternoon. John Edward, who has been coming to Australia for roughly 20 years, and I think without fail, every 6 months during those 20 years he appears, once in the middle of the year to do a little bit of media and spruiking, and then towards the end of the year to perform his stage routine, talking to the dead. And for years, I guess the attitude is, well, what can we do? This happens year after year after year after year. Many years ago, the TV took an interest in a skeptical angle, and I appeared on one of the TV shows about it, but that was over a decade ago, easily over a decade ago. The investigative media don't care anymore. He's just a fixture, and he always gets a run on other media, you know, the morning chat shows or this, that, and the women's magazines. I don't want to make that sound the way it came out. The trashy magazines usually aimed at women. Fashions and royal news and Hollywood gossip and that sort of thing. So anyway, that's his territory as the tram sails away. So I'm going to be meeting Lara from the committee and Trish Han, and we'll see how it goes. At the moment, I'm scheduled to sort of hang in the background a little bit, because for me to appear outside a psychic show like John Edward, my face is still, after all these years, still reasonably known, so that might backfire. And it was thought that it would be better not to have a middle-aged man trying to hand out leaflets at one of these things. It would be a better approach to have younger people. Anyway, I can see Trish sitting on the steps. We'll see how it goes. It should be a very interesting afternoon. Trish Han, we were just approached by this guy handing out Scientology literature. How about that?
Yeah, weird as, right?
Yeah.
In the middle of town hall, on the steps. There's all sorts of things going on here. There's, people protesting down there. There's people going about their business, and this dude's just handing out, real casually just handing out Scientology flyers.
Yeah, happy as Larry, we might say. Now, you've been involved with something similar to what we're going to do this afternoon. In fact, here in this country and also in the UK with Sally Morgan.
Indeed, yeah. So, it was back in the winter, so I think it was July, I want to say. She was here doing a show. It didn't sell very well. It was maybe 200-300 seats, I think, something like that in Sydney. So we came along and we handed out the same flyers that we're handing out tonight, just informing people of what to look for with regards to, cold reading and the usual things that the psychics go for.
Well, that's not a sound effect, by the way, folks. That's a real town hall clock chiming.
To prove that we're in town hall and we're not in a sound stage somewhere.
Right.
So it's just about things like to look out for, like what are the usual predatory things that they go for, and also to actually just look after yourself and make sure that you're not being vulnerable to these things.
And we're not being, what's the word? We're not being pig-headed about it or bombastic.
No.
It's very gentle, I hope.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of it is to educate people, and you don't educate them by either scaring them or threatening them.
Yeah.
So the way that you educate people is by saying, look, hey, have you considered this? Have you looked at this? And the good thing as well is the wording of the leaflet it's benign. Like it's not accusatory in any way. It's just, hey, look, here's some things to look out for. See if you spot any of them. And if you don't, then fantastic, you're going to have an entertaining night. But here are some red flags that you need to be aware of.
Yeah. Now, you worked on that, I worked on it, some other people worked on that, and I think it's pretty good, the flyer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just points out some things, gives some URLs and so on.
Yeah, it's taken from a flyer that was handed out. I won't name the guy, but a few years back in London, I was involved in an event, shall we say, where a guy handed out flyers outside of a Sally Morgan event in London. And it all went a bit south because Sally Morgan's husband came out and threatened really, really very aggressively. And so I was there and a couple of people there filming just to see, because it happened before at a previous date and he wanted to get some backup this time. So we filmed it and it was pretty horrific to watch, actually.
Yeah.
The wording is very, very well thought out. Maybe we'll stop for a second.
It's all happening here at the Town Hall steps, folks. It's a popular meeting place here in Sydney and all sorts of things are happening. Is that... Oh, no, there's a proposal. Look at this. That was funny. All right. Now, just getting back to... Yes, so there was Sally Morgan's husband who went a bit ballistic. And I must say a similar thing happened to me in a respect. Years and years ago, I went to Mind Body Wallet and I was pointing out something to one of the people selling a certain brand of magic band. And he got very short with me very quickly and said a very rude word to me indeed and told me basically, will you please remove yourself from my vicinity? Or the way he put it was a bit more...
Yes.
Anyway. So, and it just occurred to me later, of course, they don't want someone like you or me tumbling there.
You're threatening their livelihood.
You're
absolutely threatening. Yeah. And the thing is as well, it's a go-to reaction for people that know that they are actually in the wrong. If you're in the right, then you'll usually counter it with like the proof that you're in the right and the evidence and that kind of stuff. And like maybe you get a bit exasperated and then you start swearing later on. But if your first option is to start throwing punches and start getting aggressive, you know that you're onto a losing battle.
And it's a dead giveaway to us that. I think that would be the case. Yeah, if you truly believe in something, a lot of the times you want to try and impart your...
You want to evangelize.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I saw this great movie, let me tell you about it. Or
exactly.
Something. Yeah,
exactly. And that's the thing as well, is that when these people are there at these events, the last thing they want is for other people to overhear and eavesdrop on these conversations. So they actually, if they can threaten you really short and sharp, get you gone, then it's not a drawn out thing. Whereas if you're standing there asking questions over and over and over again, people might be listening and going, oh, that's a very good point. So I think it's in their interest actually to be really aggressive very, very quickly so that you do disappear and the next mark can come along and be scammed.
And hopefully this flyer, what it says on it are things to look out for. Subtly, why is the psychic asking so many questions and getting so much, all sorts of things like that.
Yeah, and just little things as well, like are you currently grieving? Are you currently vulnerable? Are you looking for actual answers to things, or do you just want reassurance? It's that kind of stuff as well, because, a term quite frequently used is they're grief vampires, and they absolutely are. And my concern is that how many of these people going to this show are actually suffering. Like how many of them have recently lost someone? Maybe there's someone they lost a long time ago and they just cannot deal with it. They are absolutely vulnerable and they're paying hundreds of dollars. Oftentimes to, it'll be just your local person that you go along and chat to, but sometimes it is for these big stage shows, and they're very... it's just so unscrupulous.
It really is. It really is. All right. So let's see. The time's just as Big Ben behind us just reminded us.
What time is it? I can't turn around.
2:30. Just after 2:30, there goes another one of these flash new trams. How about that? In fact, I was sitting at the tram stop just a minute ago, and I had tourists coming up to me asking me where they could buy tickets. Not yet, folks. They're still under testing, but they look great.
Yeah, next month.
Next month. Come to Sydney next month. All right. Stay tuned. In a moment, we'll find out what happens next. I'm standing on the opposite side of the State Theatre. On either side of the door of the State Theatre, the entrance, is Trish Han and Lara Benham with their flyers, and they're handing them out to people. It's really working. People are interested. They're looking as they make their way in. Big sign in lights, live at the State. Psychic medium John Edward, Sunday 24th of November, 4 p.m. So far, so good. It's very low key. And yes, there goes another one. People are actually taking the flyers. We have a situation now where the crowd is lined up outside the door because the door's unopened. There are about 100 people or so waiting now, and it's spilling out onto the pavement footpath. Soon I think they'll open the doors and people will start filing in. So there's not too many people walking past at the moment to collect the flyers. So far it appears to me, of all the people I can see now lined up along the street, 80% are women, 90% are women. I guess we shouldn't be surprised. I think that's the target audience. Okay, a couple of women threw their flyers back at Trish as they walked in. Not unexpected, I guess. It's over. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, that's nice. Trish and Lara, what a fantastic job. It went very well.
It was brief but good. Yep.
It was about 15, 20 minutes?
No, it was more than that. It was more than that. It was about half an hour.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Time flies when you're interested in having fun. How was it?
Yeah, I mean, you have that constant state of mild anxiety that someone's going to punch you in the back of the head as they walk away and having read it. And there were some people that were a bit annoyed, but most people actually just read it and realised that it wasn't aggressive and it wasn't confrontational. And I'm sure a lot of people were just going for fun, and therefore, no worries.
Yeah. And you were giving out quite a few flyers too. You're on the side where the people were mostly queuing on your side, Trish, outside the door. But you were still quite successfully giving away flyers.
Yeah, so I was just having to try to guess who was going in and then ask them the question, are you going into the show? And they, for the most part, I didn't have... The most negative thing I had happen was one lady had a bit of a read and handed it back to me extremely politely. And then the person she was with came and asked to take one anyway. So yeah. they were literally coming, like some people were coming in asking for a couple more for their friends. So I didn't have any dramas at all.
Well, as you said earlier, Trish, John Edward welcomes Skeptics.
Yeah.
So they should be delighted to get a flyer like that. And
nothing on that flyer is much different from what he was saying himself about there are people out there who are predatory, who make stuff up. Fantastic. Except, you know, it's that whole thing of like atheists only believe in one less God than you do. It's that whole kind of, you know.
Well, folks, what I'll do is I'll put a link in this week's show notes to the flyer itself. And actually, I'll see what we can do. Maybe we can have a generic version that has without certain information on here, but never mind. It was amazingly successful, and what I hope is it'll inspire other people around the world to do a similar sort of thing. So once again, Trish and Lara, cheers and well done. If you're interested in printing out this flyer for yourself, just follow the link in this week's show notes. It's a good overview. It's very gently written, and you can download and print out the PDF. It's not easy to front up and hand out flyers to people going into a psychic show, with the ever-present thought in the back of your mind that somebody might take particular offence and get abusive or rude, or even worse. I'm full of admiration for Trish Han and Lara Benham. And I suspect we'll be back next year to do it all over again, because for John Edward, Australia is indeed a very happy hunting ground.
Hi everyone, my name's Sue Urachi. I'll be presenting at Skepticon this year. What I'll be talking to you about is presenting anti-science bingo, where we go through all of the most common anti-science tropes. I'll help you debunk them, and I'll give you all the information that you need to have a discussion at your next dinner party. I look forward to seeing you there.
Hi, I'm Tim Mendham. I'm the Executive Officer of Australian Skeptics, and I'd like to talk to you about some of the stuff we've published in the Skeptic magazine in the past. This episode is called Pint-Sized Fun, and it comes out of the Skeptic magazine, volume 37, number 4, which was published in December 2017. In Australia, we've had a long and close association with the history of those informal gatherings known as Skeptics in the Pub. Now, Wikipedia defines Skeptics in the Pub as, quote, an informal social event designed to promote fellowship and social networking among skeptics, critical thinkers, free thinkers, rationalists and other like-minded individuals. It provides an opportunity for skeptics to talk, share ideas and have fun in a casual atmosphere, and discuss whatever topic issues come to mind, while promoting skepticism, science and rationality. Now, of course, that leaves out a key ingredient, which is the pub. Meeting in a convivial environment with drinks and hopefully a meal, a speaker and probably some interesting, intriguing and or rude questions means the venue has to lend itself to such activities, and generally not charging for admission, which means there aren't that many places where such gatherings can take place. Some are quite small, a table in the corner may do, and others require a room dedicated to the event. So your choice of venue will be very much decided by what sort of meeting you intend it to be. The Skeptics in the Pub movement is generally agreed to have started in London in 1999, and here's where the Australian connection raises its head. Dr. Scott Campbell was Associate Professor and Reader in Philosophy at the University of Nottingham. Equally pertinent is that he was born in Tasmania. He got his doctorate from the University of New South Wales in Sydney and was on the committee of Australian Skeptics Inc. in Sydney during the mid-90s. He also spoke at the Third World Skeptics Convention in 2000, at that time the largest skeptical event ever held in Australia. The London Skeptic in the Pub started in February 1999, with the first speaker being Wendy Grossman, who was the founder and editor of the UK Skeptic magazine. Campbell based the idea around philosophy in the pub and science in the pub. There were two groups which had been running in Australia for some time. The first London Skeptic in the Pub attracted 30 attendees. It's still going, and now joined by many others. Wikipedia suggests more than 100 active satellite chapters around the world, including more than 30 in the US and more than 40 in the UK. Calling them satellites, of course, is misleading. While some Skeptics in the Pubs are activities run by more established skeptical groups, one of the key aspects of Skeptics in the Pub is that they are informal and run their own programs. The Glasgow Skeptics decided to investigate the true status of the phenomenon and did a global survey of Skeptics in the Pub managers and organisers. Glasgow Skeptics itself was formed in 2009 and runs 2 pub meetings per month, as well as other meetings and lectures. The Glaswegians contacted 115 organisations around the world via the Skeptics in the Pub's own websites, Facebook, Twitter, email, etc., whatever means the particular SITP used. They heard back from 53 of them. In the UK, Ireland, they approached 53 and had 28 responses, Both sets of responses can be seen to be a good representative sample of the entirety of the Skeptics in the Pub movement. One issue is knowing whether those skeptics in the pub that did not respond were either inactive or just a bit apathetic. It can be a frustration to would-be attendees if they visit a meetup page and see little to indicate whether a meeting is on or not. It's even more frustrating if they take the plunge and turn up for a Skeptics in the Pub meeting and find there's no one there. To a certain extent, however, this is understandable. Skeptics in the pubs are launched with the best of intentions, but because of various factors, such as there just isn't an audience or key organisers move on, they can fall by the wayside. There have been various like that in Australia, though currently there are 19 groups listed in the pages of our Skeptic magazine, most of which, but not all, are active in holding meetings and sometimes take on more active roles. Should add actually that the Skeptics in the Pub in Sydney was founded by your host, Richard Saunders. Of the UK groups, 5 had only one organiser, which puts groups at a risk of fading if that one person decides enough is enough, gets transferred or for whatever reason pulls out of the organiser role. Conversely, 8 groups had 5 or more organisers, which implies a good backup for all contingencies and hopefully not many arguments over the direction. 34 of the Skeptics in the pubs who responded have Facebook pages and 20 have Facebook groups. 3 use Twitter, 32 Meetup, 9 use YouTube and 3 each for both Instagram and Google+. 6 groups frequently or always pay for advertising, with 5 occasionally, 7 rarely, and the vast majority, 31, never using paid advertising. But they do use a wide range of media to promote events. Apart from Facebook, Twitter and Meetup, there is promotion via other groups, asking speakers to promote their own talk, newsletters, boosted Facebook events using keywords, flyers, selecting a couple of high-profile speakers during the year to encourage a regular audience, and of course word of mouth. One even resorted to using posters in the pub toilets. With Facebook followers, 9 groups had 250 or less, and 4 had more than 2,000. The rest are largely gathered around the 250 to 1,000 mark. So, how often do they meet? At the bottom end, 10 groups hosted 5 or less events per year. At the top end, 2 groups hosted more than 30, which is close to 3 per month. That's a lot. The vast majority host between 6 and 15 events, so we can say monthly meetings are the norm. As to the size of the meetings, 5 groups had an average attendance of 10 people or less, which is intimate, with 7 averaging more than 50. The Sydney Skeptics in the pub does get more than 50 on a general basis. The rest are fairly evenly staggered between 11 and 50. In the UK, the average donation made by attendees is £2.70. In Australia, we don't charge for attendance and we'll take anybody. So what advice did these groups and these managers of the STPs offer up for those who would like to set up a Skeptics in the Pub or get theirs running more smoothly? Consistency of timing and format is an important aspect of keeping audiences interested. Same venue, same time, same date, said one UK group. And that's pretty good advice generally. One Australian Skeptic in the Pub put it, promote early and promote often. Get on the podcast, especially for bigger events like Skeptic Camps. We rarely, if ever, pay for promotion. You share links into the regional skeptical groups. We regularly get people from interstate for our Skeptic Camps. We get people sharing the events. Another Australian group. Tip number 1, develop an ongoing relationship with the manager of the venue. Always bear in mind it is a business for them and holding an event has to be commercially viable, particularly if they are putting on extra staff for the event. For instance, some will actually charge you to use the venue, others will say you have to have a minimum spend on booze and meals, and I know that I do my fair share of adding to that minimum spend. Being properly prepared is a regular suggestion, especially with appropriate seating, theatre style or dinner, and ensuring you have the correct AV for all occasions. One group suggested providing laptops for presenters to make sure they are compatible with the venue. Having a well thought out checklist for both prior and during the event is obviously vital. Make sure everyone knows what they have to do and they're prepared. Finding good speakers can be a challenge. Generally, recommendations from attendees or committee members is a good starting point. Once you have one, prepping them is important so they are aware of how much time they have, what they can expect from the audience and what level of information they will need to have. Most sceptical audience are pretty well educated, have an interest in science, but few of them have PhDs in advanced mathematical theory, so try and steer clear of the really heavy end of the scale. Always have a plan B, says one New Zealand group, and most importantly, as one Danish group suggests, a good place with decent beer. Apart from all the quantitative stuff and good advice, the Glasgow survey allowed respondents free rein to wax lyrical on issues they've faced. Sometimes you wonder why they do it. For instance, for one New Zealand group, they said that was a cold, rainy night when there was me and one other person who turned up. So not a lot of interesting questions, I don't think, at that meeting. That could be particularly embarrassing when you have a high-profile speaker who arrives and there are more people behind the bar than in the audience. One European group reported on a particularly challenging event. We had a sceptical event about Satanism, they said, when two very drunk bona fide Satanists turned up and ended up in a drunken fight. That was interesting, but the talk was very good. If only they could all be as exciting as that.
Be Reasonable is the interview show from the Merseyside Skeptic Society, where each month I speak to someone about their fringe beliefs. Over the years I've spoken to psychics, UFO believers, moon landing deniers, flat earthers, hollow earthers and all manner of unusual conspiracy theorists. But I've also talked to AIDS denialists, white supremacists, gay conversion therapists. I even interviewed Jim Humble, the inventor of Miracle Mineral Supplement, a form of industrial bleach that he and his followers use to treat cancer and HIV. This isn't a debate show, and my aim isn't to win an argument. But when we listen to how people promote and justify the ideas that we disagree with, even the dangerous ones, I think we become much more effective at countering those ideas. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, look for Be Reasonable on Apple Podcasts and everywhere else that podcasts live.
Now, by this time next week, we will all know the winner of the Australian Skeptics Bent Spoon Award, given annually at the National Convention for the most preposterous piece of pseudoscientific or paranormal piffle in the previous year. So I thought it would be interesting to dive back through the pages of history to see what the Australian media have made of the Bent Spoon Award over the years, and a good place to do that is at a website called Trove, which is trove.nla for National Library of Australia, .gov.au. A wonderful resource, actually. It's for anyone doing research. It's probably one of your first ports of call. Documented newspapers and articles and journals going back over a century. And in no particular order, here are some of the references to the Australian Skeptics Bent Spoon over the years. The Canberra Times, published on Sunday the 12th of June, 1994. Levarch takes out Piffle honours. The Commonwealth Attorney-General has been awarded the Australian Skeptics' highest honour, the Bent Spoon Award, for this year's most preposterous piece of paranormal piffle, National President Barry Williams said yesterday. Talking from the Australian Skeptics Annual Convention in Sydney, Mr. Williams said the award, which bestowed great ignominy on the receiver, was in recognition of the department's enterprise agreement that would allow staff to present sickness certificates from alternative practitioners rather than from medical practitioners. The award, which features a bent spoon mounted on a piece of wood from Noah's Ark, has only been claimed once, Mr. Williams said. That was last year by the Tonight Live television crew and was awarded for their weirdo stories. The Attorney-General, Michael Levarch, was not invited to the ceremony to collect the award, Mr. Williams said. He probably would have had us arrested for sedition or something. Mr. Lavarch was not mentioned by name on the plaque. Knowing this government, he'd probably be foreign minister by next week. The award has been in existence since 1982. This year's runner-up for the award was the Brisbane City Council for enacting an ordinance that directed that, in all new developments, the number 4 was not to be used as a street number because the Chinese find it to be unlucky. The next search result on the list is from, again, the Canberra Times. This time, Sunday the 19th of April 1987. Skeptics award Spoon to Brock. The Australian Skeptics Bench Spoon Award was awarded yesterday to racing driver and businessman Mr. Peter Brock for his controversial energy polarizer. The president of Australian Skeptics, Mr. Barry Williams, announcing the award, now in its 5th year, said, "It's sort of a Nobel Prize for nuttiness, an Oscar for irrationality." The polarizer, when fitted to a car, was said to realign the molecules to make the vehicle run more smoothly and improve its performance using energies unknown to science. The Skeptics' first $1,000 journalism award went to Mike Willesee for a 2-part television investigation of the Jewish psychic Mr. Uri Geller. Second prize in the category went to science writer Bob Beale of the Sydney Morning Herald for an article on creationists and the Museum of Australia. About 100 people attended yesterday's convention at the Australian National University. And now we come to, and I guess this search result does favour the Canberra Times because most of these returns are from the Canberra Times, so that's fine. We come to the edition published on Saturday the 31st of August 1985. Wire Detector earns award. The Melbourne and Metropolitan Board of Works was awarded the Bench Spoon Award for 1985 at the Congress yesterday. The Australian Skeptics, a group dedicated to exposing bogus science, gives the award as a reminder of the psychic spoon-bending claims made by magician Uri Geller some years ago. The Melbourne and Metropolitan Board of Works employed an American designer to locate no longer visible buildings in a park near Melbourne. The designer, Mrs. Karen Hunt, used a pair of coat hangers, electromagnetic photo field detectors, to map out the park. The president of the Australian Skeptics, Mr. Mark Plummer, praised the board for its naivety and gullibility. At the same session of the Congress, Mr. Ronald Strawn of the Australian Museum criticised creation scientists as duplicitous, authoritarian, and anti-intellectual. And here's a result from 1989, published on Sunday the 26th of March, again in the Canberra Times. Skeptics scratch for silly claims. And this is by Keith Scott. There was a lack of silly claims in 1988. In fact, 1988 was such a bad year for way-out suggestions that the Australian Skeptics had trouble finding candidates for their annual Bench Spoon Award. The Skeptics present a Bench Spoon annually to the person they judge makes the most preposterous, paranormal or pseudoscientific claim of the year. Some previous awards have been given to Tom Wards, the world's silliest clairvoyant, the Melbourne Metropolitan Board of Works for endorsing a psychic archaeologist, Anne Dankbar, who claimed to have found the Colossus of Rhodes, and Peter Brock for his energy polarizer. This year, however, was shaping up to be an almost silly claim-free year, until, that is, Diane McCann came up with quite a remarkable claim in the Adelaide-based magazine The Golden Age, exploring new horizons in the New Age. According to the president of Australian Skeptics, Barry Williams, there was very little overt activity on the psychic, paranormal and pseudoscientific fronts at all until Miss McCann saved the skeptics from the embarrassing position of having nothing in particular to be skeptical about. In an article in the Golden Age, which also had a message from the Lord Mayor of Adelaide, Steve Condis, and stories on dolphins, abductions by UFOs, and palmistry, Miss McCann made the somewhat surprising claim that Adelaide was founded on one of the major temples of Atlantis. Australian Skeptics was unsure whether Miss McCann meant that Adelaide was actually built on the site of one of the temples of Atlantis, or whether she meant that the city's layout was the same as an Atlantean temple. So it wrote to her and received a reply in the nick of time last week. The reply, as it turned out, was even more surprising than the original article, although it appeared Miss McCann had changed her story a little. In her letter, she told the Skeptics that, "I cannot give you any more information on the fact that Adelaide is built on an ancient Lemurian site, but it is ... It is well known amongst the psychic people, and actually anyone who comes here is immediately impressed with the energy and the love this city generates." Lemuria, according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, was a hypothetical prehistoric continent in the Indian Ocean, supposedly now represented chiefly by Madagascar. Even more astonishing, given Miss McCann's claim about the ancient temple generating energy and love, is the encyclopedia's description of Lemurians who are supposed to have inhabited the lost land. Britannica has it that the Lemurians existed in Roman religion and appeared in grotesque and terrifying forms, haunted their former homes, and visited relatives and friends, sometimes causing them injury. Australian Skeptics did some checking of its own on Miss McCann and discovered that she had a company called Accelerated Business Technologies, which handled the South Australian end of a business motivation course called Money and You. Its parent group is the Accelerated Learning Institute, which is trying to set up what it calls a global energy network to solve problems such as hunger, trade, and third world poverty. The Institute runs motivational courses which are very much a part of the so-called New Age. Ms. McCann is apparently qualified in neuro-linguistic programming, educational kinesiology, psychoperistaltic massage, chakra balancing, and past life regression. She is also the co-founder of the Australian Institute of Rebirthing, holds firewalking evenings, and believes that when a critical mass of people are together, major shifts occur. Addressing the Skeptics Annual Convention at the Science and Technology Centre in Canberra yesterday, Mr. Williams said, "I have great delight in announcing that Miss McCann, who may or may not be related to Terry McCann of Minder, is the recipient of the 1988 Bent Spoon Award." And as a quick aside from me, for those of you who don't know, Minder was a very popular show in the 1970s and 1980s, based in London, about wheeler dealers and dodgy enterprises and things like that. We read on. The Skeptics' more serious award to the journalist who produced the most skeptical story of the year went to Robin Williams from ABC Radio's The Science Show. Mr. Barry Williams said that Mr. Williams represented voice of rational thinking in Australia and produced high-quality programs which maintained people's interest in science and rational thought. Mr. Williams said he believed that since Australian Skeptics was founded, the media in general, apart from some tabloid newspapers, had become more skeptical than it used to be and did not rush to interview visiting psychics with such frequency. He said that the greatest perpetrators of irrational thought in Australia today were the New Age followers who promoted such things as numerology, crystals, astrology, and dolphins, and New Earth people or creationists who deny the evolution of man and believe that human history is only 6,000 years old. The ideas promoted by these people are the ideas of ignorance, he said. Everything they are on about is old hat dressed up in modern super salesman jargon. Mr. Williams said later that the Australian Skeptics was like a consumer protection agency against silly claims. His greatest concern was that people who are already emotionally or psychologically disturbed sometimes come to greater harm by following the advice of cults or psychics. We require evidence, and the evidence for most of these things we criticize is pretty thin on the ground, he said. The whole New Age phenomenon is clearly the greatest sham of the late 1980s. It tends to attract people like Shirley MacLaine, and other people think that if someone like that is involved, then it must be good. I spit when I see Japan killing dolphins, but that's not because I think dolphins are spiritual beings. Now we jump to another resource altogether, Google, and one more, and slightly more recent. This one comes from Discovery magazine, published or at least online, by none other than Dr. Phil Plait, the bad astronomer. 3rd of December 2009. Australian skeptics jeer Merrill Dorey. Merrill Dorey, the truth-impaired mouthpiece of the Australian Vaccination Network, a group of anti-vaccination conspiracy mongers who couldn't find reality with both hands, a compass, and detailed instructions, was honoured by the Australian Skeptics this week. Richard Saunders and Rachel Dunlop, on behalf of the Australian Skeptics, gave Dorey their annual Bent Spoon Award, awarded to the perpetrator of the most preposterous piece of paranormal or pseudoscientific piffle. Dorey certainly fits the bill. She hasn't met a conspiracy theory she hasn't loved or couldn't use to threaten the public health with. Merrill appeared on national television telling a reporter that we didn't die from these diseases 30 years ago, and we're not going to die from them now, juxtaposed alongside footage of babies gasping for breath as the journalist detailed the story of the death of Dana McCaffrey from the vaccine-preventable disease whooping cough. Dorey is also an HIV denier and, as you can see from reading those links, doing her darndest to threaten public health. It's a shame someone like that has any voice at all in the media, and she spreads misinformation that can lead to the deaths of many people, and we know for a fact the drop in herd immunity in areas where the AVN is loudest has resulted in deaths from preventable diseases. Dorey is going on the offensive, issuing a press release, going on the radio, and being interviewed in papers, saying that she's proud to get this award since the skeptics are obviously just dogmatic shills for Big Pharma, etc. And while she says this, people, including babies, stricken and some die due to vaccine-preventable illnesses. Nice work, Dorey. I'm so glad you're proud of the damage you've done. And that's just some of the press mentions I can find online of mentions of the Australian Skeptics Bent Spoon Award. In more recent years, in fact last year, the current holder of the Bent Spoon is Sarah Stevenson, who wrote a blog, or I think she probably still does, called Sarah's Day, for the promotion of questionable natural health remedies via her vast network of followers. Before that, the National Institute of Complementary Medicine. Before that, Julie Wileman and Brian Martin and the Faculty of Science at the University of Wollongong for awarding Wileman a doctorate on the basis of a PhD riddled with errors. Then there's Pete Evans, the celebrity chef, for promoting questionable diets and health advice. Larry Marshall, who was the chief executive of the CSIRO, for his support of water divining. Chiropractors Association, Fran Sheffield of Homeopathy Plus for advocating the use of magical sugar and water in the place of tried and true vaccination. And on it goes back into history. A link to all those interesting winners, or we might say losers, in this week's show notes.
I'm Mick West. In my podcast, Tales from the Rabbit Hole, I have extended conversations with people who have been involved in conspiracy culture. I do this for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because it's really interesting. These people have great stories about how they fell down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, what they did down there, and what it was that helped them out. Sometimes I also talk to people who investigate conspiracy theories, and they have equally fascinating stories from the other side. Secondly, I want to understand how best to prevent the spread of conspiracy theories and misinformation, which is an increasing problem in a time when alternative media is exploding. The best way to do this is to communicate effectively with the people involved, and the best way to do that is with a nice long chat. So check it out, Tales from the Rabbit Hole, tfgrh.com.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. And thank you to Trish Han and Lara Benham, the real stars of the moment when it came to handing out those flyers to people attending the John Edward performance. And again, in this week's show notes, you'll find a link to that flyer yourself. Non-confrontational. Just here's some information. If you want to read it, that's fine. I think it worked very well. I mean, I don't think we're going to get John Edward or any of his ilk standing on the stage holding one of these flyers and saying to the audience, like, look, I've got something to tell you. You know, I really can't talk to the dead. It's all been a performance. No, that's not going to happen. Will it bring the industry down? No. Will it change some minds? Will it make people think? I think yes. And that surely is worth it. And we can talk about that, if you wish, at Skepticon in Melbourne. This is the last chance. The last few days you have to get tickets. And just looking online now and seeing the photographs from the first day of the New Zealand Skeptics Conference, what a large turnout, and everyone seems to be having a great time there. And lots of the stars appearing there will be appearing in Melbourne. Now, Maynard and I are heading down to Melbourne in a couple of days. We're going to have a skeptical road trip. Oh, yes, from Sydney to Melbourne. And in the Skeptic Mobile, the Skeptic Zone Mobile, will be carrying the Ben Spoon Award. Looking forward to seeing all our friends in Melbourne, and looking forward to seeing you at the Australian Skeptics National Convention, Skepticon. Links in this week's show notes. Again, this is your last opportunity in the coming week to get your tickets, and after next weekend, you'll have to wait till 2020. And I'm looking forward to seeing the Skeptic Zone reporters I rarely see. Mandy Lee Noble, Heidi Robinson, Dr. Pauly. It'll be great to see you all. And thank you to those people who continue to support the Skeptic Zone financially at PayPal, Patreon, via skepticzone.tv, or should I say via PayPal and Patreon at Skeptic Zone TV. I think you know what I mean. And thank you to those people who just recently came on board to help support the show. A lot of people have decided that $5 a month is a good level to support the show, and I'm very grateful for that. And I'm very grateful to those people who pay less or pay more. Every cent. Thank you very much, and the whole team thanks you. And the Skeptical Cats, thank you. They're quite happy. They've just had their breakfast. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.